Hi folks, it's me, Michaela, and welcome to my murder board. And also literally every light I own being moved directly in front of this wall. I am mildly blinded right now, so I hope you are benefiting from this. But this is your girlie's first time using a microphone, and it took me approximately 7 years to figure out how to do this. So it's now dark. It is 9 p.m. on a Friday, and this is what I'm doing with my life. Today, I'm going to try and solve a murder. And by today, I mean mostly tomorrow. I'm going to try and solve this murder by the end of the day tomorrow. And if you're wondering, Michaela, what murder are you solving? What murder, Michaela? Well, what is it? It's this one. I'm going to attempt to solve Murder in the Family by Cara Hunter before it is revealed at the end of the book. So here we are. This book is the transcript of a true crime show called Infamous. Correct? Oh my god, imagine if I got that incorrect. You'd be like, girl, are you even reading this? Yes, it's called Infamous. And one of the producers for this show is Guy Howard. And a thing about Guy is, one, his name is Guy. Two, 20 years ago, his stepfather was murdered while he was asleep upstairs, and they never found out who did it. So now, at the 20-year anniversary of the murder, we have gathered together 6 experts to see all the details of the crime, get brand new interview, brand new information and clues, and try and solve this murder. If you're wondering who those experts are, I'm really glad you asked, because I'm going to tell you about them right now. So for the experts, I'm literally standing on my couch right now. We have, like I said, 6 experts. We have Bill, a detective, JJ, a crime scene investigator, Layla, a forensic psychologist, Hugo, a lawyer, Mitchell, a journalist, and Alan, another detective. Things to note about these detectives: Bill is from the States, Alan is from the UK. This crime takes place in the UK, so keep that in mind. So the show in the book is 7 episodes, and I have read the first episode in order to make the basis for the murder board. Then I will be reading the rest of it and updating you at the end of each episode, I think, going forward. And I will hopefully have this solved before the last episode in the book. One other thing that I have with me today, you may think, Michaela, that is a wooden spoon, but it is not. No. This is highly professional to provide you with the vibes. To explain a little bit about the murder board, okay? We have Luke, in case you haven't figured out yet. Luke is the guy who died. He is the center of it all, honey. And then we have, obviously, connections. Okay, I'll talk you through this in a minute. And then along the top here, we have the timeline for the day of the murder, October 3rd, 2003. Let's get into the characters for the book, shall we? And also the characters for the crime. We have Luke. Luke was 26 at the time he died, and he was the husband to Caroline, who was 40 at the time of his death. One might call Caroline a cougar. Caroline had 3 children from her previous marriage to Andrew. These children are Maura, age 15, Emily, age 13, and Guy, the guy we already know, Guy, age 10. Andrew, we're standing up, it's getting serious. Andrew, before he was married to Caroline, was married to Amanda, and they had a kid named Rupert, and he's 23 at the time of the murder. So he is the half sibling to these 3. These 3 are the stepkids to Luke, Rupert to Luke. We're gonna get there. To just talk a little bit about this side of the board, Amanda is dead. Amanda died in a car crash when Rupert was 6 years old. And although it was described and finalized as an accident, people did have questions and suspicions, because at the time Amanda died, guess who had in the recent months been hired as a live-in nanny for the Howards? That's their last name. Caroline. So Caroline and Andrew announced they were getting married weeks after Amanda died. I don't know why you wouldn't just wait, but they didn't. I guess maybe they just liked the drama. So then obviously they had the 3 kids, la-di-da-di-di-di-di. Andrew Honey, Andrew's also dead. He died in 1999. Toodaloo. We'll get back to Rupert. But let's talk about Luke, shall we? Luke was Australian. He was born in Australia. He grew up in the middle of basically nowhere. It was in the middle of nowhere. Like out back, he was back there. And his parents, Brian and Maureen, were British. They moved to Australia, had Luke, la-di-da-di-da. Okay. It's also thought to be that Brian had a falling out with his parents, Victor and Florence, before moving to Australia. So these ties were cut. Brian and Maureen. Let's talk a little bit about them. While in Australia, Maureen died of cancer. And then 5 years later, Brian died of cirrhosis of the liver. So, by the age of 17, Luke was an orphan. He moved to Sydney. He became a surfer because he's that guy. And he bartended to stay afloat, pay the bills, all that jazz, okay? He got the nickname Easy Rider. His last name was Rider. His life was now so easy. Seems like not the nickname to give him considering his family circumstances, but here we are. That's the nickname he got. So he then also went to Greece. He was bartending in Greece, and that is where he met Rupert. So Rupert and Luke were friends. But then, Rupert went home. He was no longer in Greece. In 1999, Andrew died, heart attack. And soon after Andrew died, Rupert came back into contact with Luke, like running into each other in England. How cute, how fun. Luke ends up living, crashing on the couch vibes. That becomes very extended. And in 2000, Rupert brings Luke to Caroline's Christmas party. This is where Luke and Caroline meet, okay? And then Luke and Caroline get married. Imagine bringing your friend to a Christmas party with you, to the stepmother you don't like, and then he ends up marrying her. Dang, that's rough. In addition, Luke, now that he is back in England, decides to reconnect with his grandparents, Victor and Florence. Victor is dead. Florence is still kicking though, okay? One thing we learned is that once Florence passes, there's quite the inheritance that will be going to Luke. And this might be kind of convenient for Caroline, because Caroline is currently rich people. Now, you would notice that Luke was not rich people before now, considering he was crashing on Rupert's couch and letting him pay all the bills. Luke was just regular guy. Okay, but then he met Caroline, rich person, who lived in rich person house, Dorney Place. You can tell the level of rich by the fact that this house has a name, like it has a title that it is known by. That is the level of rich we're talking about, right? And Caroline was left this house by her husband, Andrew, when he died. But one thing about this place, got quite the bills. And one other thing about Caroline, her job is being rich woman. So I'm not seeing much income there. I really don't know how this woman is sustaining things. That is kind of the state of things. I guess I should talk about Alice. I really only put her here because I don't know if maybe she's going to come back later. Alice is the sister of Andrew. She kind of had a fight with Caroline about the funeral for Andrew because Alice did not think that the kids should go to the funeral as they were all still so young. Guy was 6 at the time, which means Emily was, hold on, I'm doing math, 7, and Maura was 9. Let's pretend that I did that math correctly. Anyway, Dorney Place. This is where Luke was found murdered. At the house. In the garden, exactly. At the bottom of the stairs in the garden, to be very, very exact. And at the bottom of these garden stairs, he was found with his face and head brutally beaten. Like, kind of a bit much. Dorney Place. Rich person house. What else about it? Let's take some key notes, shall we? 1, it is hidden from the streets. You cannot see the house from the street, and there also is a gate. And at that gate is a keypad, and that keypad opens the gate. That's how that works. Great job explaining that. Basically, what we can take away from this is that nobody is getting into Dorney Place unless you have the key or you know someone who's letting you in. One other thing to note, there's no security cameras. Why you would own a mansion and you wouldn't have any security cameras, beyond me, but hey, they didn't have any. 2003, I guess, that was the life. One other final thing I will note about Dorney Place is that there's a lot of passageways. Dorney Place started off way back when as 2 cottages. Then these 2 cottages were like attached, and then people just like kept expanding off of it. So it's pretty confusing. There's a lot of stairwells, there's a lot of passageways, there's a lot of weird hallways and things, attics, all this kind of stuff due to the nature of the building. I have no idea if this is going to be important later on, but I noted it, okay? Because I needed to be thorough. Let's talk about October 3rd, 2003, shall we? Let's. So here's the timeline of events that we have so far. October 3rd, 2003. It's a Friday. So at 8:35 a.m., Caroline brings Guy to school. Maura and Emily also leave for school. At 9 a.m., Beatrice, who is the cleaner, arrives at the house. At 9:15, Caroline returns home before then leaving at 11:15 for lunch. 2 p.m., Beatrice leaves. I feel like it's also important that Luke was at the house this entire time. That's why he's not on the timeline. He was just at the house. He was home. At 2:45, Caroline returns from lunch. And man, how long is your lunch? Like, where are you going to lunch that is taking you from 11:15 to 2:45 p.m.? What in the rich lady is going on? Anyway, then at 3:30, Caroline leaves to go pick Guy up from school, as well as pick up the dry cleaning. At 4:15, Maura and Emily return from school and then leave at 4:45 to go to a party. At 7 p.m., Maura and Emily leave that party, and then by 7:15, they are home and eating pizza. 9:05 p.m., Caroline leaves for a party. We learned that Luke was actually supposed to go to this party with Caroline, but he told her he was not going to be going at the last minute. Interesting. At 10:30, the girls arrive home. I feel like I'm missing something because they don't get home from the party. They get home from the cinema. When did they leave for the cinema? I need to add something to my timeline. Hold on. We're back. I fixed it. So at 8:15, Caroline drops Maura and Emily at the cinema. And then at 9:05 p.m., Caroline leaves for a party. Yes, the party that Luke does not go to. At 10:30, the girls get home. At 10:45, they find the body. 10:47, they call 999. 10:52, Maura tries to call Caroline. She does not answer. And at 10:56, the police arrive at the scene of the crime. There we have the timeline of events. Now let's talk about a few other things I have up here, shall we? So at 10:20, it started to rain that night. This is important because when the police find Luke's body, it is dry underneath his body, which means that he died before it started raining. And he's been dead for about an hour, which places his time of death somewhere between 9:20 and 10:20 p.m. There are also 2 calls to the house that day. One call at 9:46 a.m. that lasted 1 minute and 20 seconds, and it was the dry cleaner, letting them know that the dry cleaning was ready to be picked up. Hence why Caroline then at 3:30 left and picked up said dry cleaning. The other call was at 2:37 p.m. Caroline's gone, Beatrice is gone, Luke's the only one in the house. The call lasts 2 minutes and 33 seconds, and it's from a payphone in King's Cross Station. So there is no way to know who made that call. But given the fact that it's 2.5 minutes long, it clearly was not a wrong number. Luke spoke to this person. Who was this person? Did this call change why Luke didn't go to the party with Caroline? Who knows? Let's keep that up in the noggins, folks, okay? One other thing to note is that Guy here, okay? The little guy. Wow. He was the only one home other than Luke that night. and he was asleep upstairs. Now, before Caroline left to go to the party, she told Luke that he could stay up till 10 because he wanted to watch a show, and it was Friday. Luke, however... Oh, I didn't move my rein. The rein should really be more like here. Okay. Luke, however, sends Guy to bed at 9:30, even though his mother told him he could stay up until 10, and that is ridiculous. Guy goes to bed at 9:30. What does this mean? It means that the window for the time of death is now 15 minutes shorter. Luke must have died somewhere between 9:35 and 10:20 because before then, Guy was still awake. He was still downstairs, and he obviously did not witness the murder. We got to move the murder back. Now, Luke, as we know, was found at the bottom of the garden stairs by Maura when she got back from the cinema. This is because she was going out back. There is this separate building that's been like renovated to be like a work room place for Luke's motorcycle, and upstairs is an apartment, and Maura's bedroom is in the apartment, so she has to go outside to get to her room. Why at 15 you would choose to have to walk outdoors to get from your room to well, I guess maybe at 15 as a girl, yeah, maybe you want to get away from the rest of your family, who knows. But anyway, that feels like way too long of a trot. I would not be doing that. Like, put me upstairs in a normal bedroom in this giant freaking house. Anyway, while she's walking to the building where her room is in the upstairs apartment, she comes across Luke at the bottom of the garden stairs with his face and head brutally beaten. She is the one who finds his body. Now, things about his body, okay? Obviously, the guy was not super recognizable. But upon the autopsy, we discover that there was a blow to the back of his head, which was significant enough to have caused him to be knocked out. So it's quite possible that Luke was knocked out, which caused him to fall down the stairs, and then he was brutally beaten in his face 8 times with what was most likely a piece of rubble from the stone stairs. Because they were under construction, there's rubble everywhere. It's likely that's what was used as the murder weapon. That's kind of like the premise. I'm hoping this is the longest that we have to talk. Otherwise, this video is going to be like 7 hours long. But here we are. So let's talk suspects. Suspect number 1, Caroline. Quite obviously, she is the wife. She was at the party before, and Luke didn't go. It was clearly a crime of passion considering like the extensive that was shown. So things are kind of pointing to Caroline, okay? The newspapers also thought this. This is called the cougar killing because Caroline at age 40 was a cougar to Luke's young 26-year-old self. Suspect number 2, Rupert. Now, Rupert, okay, he was kind of separate from the family, but after his dad died, he was kind of around a bit more. He was friends with Luke, and then Luke goes and marries his stepmom that he doesn't even like. There's potential there. He claims he wasn't even in London at the time, but who knows? Maybe he was. The third suspect that we have, the King Cross caller. Who called from that payphone? And were they the killer? And this is all the information we have because there was nobody at the house except for Luke and Guy, who was upstairs, except for the fact that there actually was somebody else. Mitch, the journalist, was also at the scene of the crime. And that is where we left off for the end of episode 1. I know it's a lot. I'm going to go read more of this book. I'm going to come back with more clues. I'm going to come back with an updated murder board, and then we will discuss further what is going on in here on this day of October 3rd, 2003. See you there. Good morning and welcome back to the murder board. It has been approximately 12 hours since I last saw you. It is not so bright, but it is relatively early. Honestly, it's not even that early. It is neither bright nor early here. I've updated the murder board a little bit to represent where we ended after episode 1. I've moved Mitch and Bill here because your girl only got so much string and I needed to make this connection for him. Wait, where's my spoon? This connection for him to Dorney Place because, as we discovered, he was at the scene of the crime. Yeah, I removed his little sticky note up there because now, that would get confusing if he was on the board twice because he's one man. So I've also, here you see King's Cross collar linked to the call up there, and Luke. Yep. I've also added the possible murder weapon. I think that's everything that I've adjusted here. If I changed anything else, obviously I now don't think it's significant enough to mention because I forgot about it. Again, where we left off. Mitch admitted he was at the scene of the crime. Let's talk about that, okay? Mitch says that he was listening in onto police radio and heard that they were sending police cars to Dorney Place. And because it is rich people place and police things don't usually happen at rich people places, as the journalist that he was like, I'm gonna go see what's happening there before anybody else does. He then, because of the gate, waited for the police to arrive, snuck in after the police. He then walked around the back and found the body, okay, was like, whoa. He's frozen in shock, okay? He's like, that's a lot. And then the police see him. So he runs because that's his instinct. It should be noted that Mitch is a black man that plays a role in his story. So that's why I'm mentioning it. And then he was arrested by the police. That's what he says. He snuck in. He saw the body, ran away, was arrested. He was then interrogated by the police for 6 hours that night before he was finally released. That's his side of the story. We then have our detectives here, Bill and Alan. They interviewed the detective on the case. My sticky note is not sticky to the wall. Peter. So Peter was the detective on the case, and he is one of the police that interviewed Mitch when he was arrested. Things to note. 1, Alan, being the British detective here, he knows Peter. When he is in the car with Bill before going to this interview, Bill asks him if he ever talked to Peter about the case, and Alan says, I was never involved in the case at the time. To which Bill goes, buddy, that's not the question I asked. And then Alan admits to Bill that he did actually speak to Peter about the case when he first heard he was going to be on the show. Now, this could just be nothing, but it is giving suspicion. Like, why are you avoiding the question? Why not just say I spoke to Peter when I found out I was going to be on the show? Why do we have to pry that information out of you, Alan? What is going on here? Peter, in his interview, has a different story for Mitch than Mitch has. Now, it was 20 years ago, so it's quite possible that, the actual truth lies somewhere in between these two. But according to the police, Mitchell was actually hiding in the bushes when he was arrested, and that they had previous evidence to believe that he was a drug dealer, and that they actually had a witness who potentially saw him at the scene 40 minutes earlier than Mitchell said. What Mitchell says, of course, is that he basically arrived there at the same time as the police at 10:56 p.m. So 40 minutes earlier would have been around 10 p.m. and that is within the window for the time of death. However, this was never conclusive evidence because the witness saw basically a car that looked like Mitch's car. There's no way to really say oh, that was him. He was there. It's guaranteed. We're going to keep you arrested now. So he was released. Mitchell did admit that he had marijuana in his car, but it was for personal use. And that clearly if he was going to see Luke to deal him drugs, wouldn't he perhaps maybe possibly bring the drugs with him? Why would he leave them in the car? This was also in 2003, we learned. This was a time when the police in the UK were under quite the amount of criticism for racial profiling. That's a possibility that also could have happened here, is what Mitchell believes. Mitchell then went on, though, to kind of never forget about this case. He was writing articles about this case continually for months and even years after the murder, which seems a little obsessive. However, I'm not really thinking that he's an actual suspect for the crime because hello, if you murdered somebody and then got away with it, wouldn't you just let it go and not be writing articles in papers about how the police haven't solved it yet years later? That seems a little backwards thinking. I'm in the mood to believe Mitchell here for what he said. Perhaps it's not quite exactly as he described, but I'm going to say it's somewhere in between these two is the truth. And I guess we'll try and figure that out later. In addition to interviewing Peter, we also have an interview with Phyllis. Phyllis is the host of the party that Caroline went to, that also Luke was supposed to go to. It was a party at a Spanish restaurant nearby for her husband's 60th birthday. It was kind of like an open door. There was a guest list, but people could bring friends, bring colleagues. You know, it was in and out. You could come, you could leave when you wanted to. Kind of like a casual party, as casual as rich people parties get. Phyllis says it's quite possible that Miss Caroline here could have been away from the party for a little bit and nobody would really notice. There was a lot of people there and it wasn't like a formal dinner. Everybody was just milling around, chit-chatting. What we do know is that Caroline was seen at the party at 9:30 p.m. This is when Phyllis spoke to her. And she was also seen at the party at 11:30 p.m. This is when the police showed up to tell her what happened and bring her back to Dorney Place. Phyllis remembers somebody saying that she looked pale at this time, perhaps because she saw a dead body, perhaps because she murdered someone. We don't know. Also, maybe this is just not a true fact because Phyllis doesn't even remember who said that. Take that with a grain of salt. Phyllis does remember, however, that Caroline was wearing a navy dress. She says she already told the police 20 years ago was dark enough to hide blood, but when was tested, there was no blood on her dress. But she was also, along with this navy dress, wearing white heels that had mud and grass on them at 11:30 p.m. Now, it was raining that night. Luke was murdered outside. It is quite possible, right? Caroline would have mud and grass on her shoes. That's it. She must have gone home. She must have killed Luke. But no, the party actually had an outdoor area that had grass, and Caroline is a known smoker. So it's quite possible that she just got mud and grass on her shoes because she went outside to smoke a cigarette at the party. However, she still does not really have a solid alibi for the times between 9:30 and 11:30, which of course is the time of death. Because of that, she's still kind of suspect number one. The main thing that people were thinking for Caroline and why she would be suspect number one is that Luke was having an affair. This is just suspicion, okay? Everybody was like, no, what's probably likely because she's a woman and she's old is that her young, hot surfer boy husband must have been cheating on her and she found out and then she just murdered him. Hello? You think 40-year-old Caroline here is going to leave a party, go home, brutally murder her 26-year-old husband in the yard, and then leave him there for her daughters to find while her 10-year-old son is in the house upstairs asleep? Like, that doesn't quite seem exactly plausible, but it is possible. There was, however, no proof to find that Luke was cheating. I guess we have to just cut that suspicion, really, until we have anything to prove it. However, what we do have the proof is that Caroline was having an affair. Plot twist, right? Right? So, Emily, she's not being interviewed for the show. She doesn't want anything to do with this show. She doesn't think we should be talking about this. She doesn't like that her brother is doing this. She doesn't really like that her sister is agreeing to be interviewed for this. She wants this to just be left alone. However, we do interview with Maura, and Maura tells us around that same time, recently before Luke was murdered, Emily told Maura that she came home one day when she was not expected to. She forgot a bag or her swim clothes, something like that. So she needed to go home to pick it up. And when she got home, she heard sex noises. And it wasn't Luke. How do we know it wasn't Luke? Because he sounded too posh. He sounded too rich man. And I have labeled him posh guy. Emily also notes that there was a vintage red sports car outside the house and that she's seen it before. It is now suspected that the vintage red sports car belongs to Posh Guy, who's having an affair with Caroline. And that's kind of the main things we find out in episode 2. What we do know now is that Alan and Hugo are now going to be looking into Posh Guy. Who is Posh Guy? Where did he come from? Why was he having an affair with Caroline? Was he at the party? Did he kill Luke? So we have a new suspect. Was Posh Guy King Cross Collar? Probably not, but we have no idea who this is, so really we have to consider that it could be anybody. So for suspects, we have the King Cross Collar. We really don't have any way to find out more information about this at the moment. Posh Guy, who Alan and Hugo are looking into. Then we have Caroline, obviously still suspect number 1 with the mud on the shoes. She's now having an affair. Does that really give her reason to kill Luke? Like, potentially, maybe he found out they had a fight, whatever. It's thought maybe Caroline was with Posh Guy in the extra building out back that Maura's room is in, because Maura wasn't there. She was at the cinema. Maybe Caroline and Posh Guy were having their affairness in that room, and then Luke saw lights or something, went outside to go see what's happening, and is confronted. There's some kind of fight. Luke is dead. It could happen. I don't really think that's plausible, because again, why would Caroline be having an affair in her daughter's room? Like, that's weird. Our other suspect, of course, is Rupert, and JJ and Layla are going to be looking into some more information on Rupert. And finally, Luke. Obviously, he's not a suspect because he's the victim, but we need to find more out about Luke and who he was. And it's agreed that Mitchell and Bill are going to look into more of the history of Luke, find out more about the victim, find out more about the crime. A couple further things to note, because of course the book isn't just the transcripts for the show. There's also social media posts afterwards, kind of like subreddit, but it's not actually Reddit vibes, of people's comments and thoughts after viewing the show. There's also emails between the cast and crew, and there's also text messages between Maura and Emily, and that's how we discover that, you know, Emily doesn't want anything to do with this. But Maura also says something along the lines of that she's her big sister and she's going to take care of it like she always has. What does that mean, Maura? We also see an email from Layla to Mitchell. She has a contact in Australia, and she's going to have him reach out to Mitchell to help him with the Australia background for Luke. But when we see that Layla emails her contact comes back to her and says, "Don't worry, I'll make sure he doesn't poke around anywhere he doesn't belong." So what's going on with Layla, Luke, and Australia? These are the questions that I have. Right now, I really feel like it's not Caroline. I feel like that would be too obvious. I feel like there's too many things that don't quite make sense so far for it to be Caroline. Precisely motive. Sure, there's the inheritance from Florence, but that gives Caroline a motive to kill Florence, not to kill Luke, because if Luke's dead, Caroline's not getting the inheritance from Florence. So that's gone. Luke's not having the affair, Caroline is. So why would there be a crime of passion against Luke? Surely then it would potentially be the other way around. So this leads me to believe Caroline's not really the suspect. It's too obvious. That's what everybody thinks. I think our best guess is the King Cross Collar. Who was this person? I feel like it would make sense that they had a conversation. It caused Luke to not go to the party for whatever reason, and they met outside. Maybe Luke didn't trust this person fully. He didn't want them in the house, especially when Guy was there, so he went outside to meet this person, but he knew them, so he let them in through the gate. They had the fight. This person killed him. I think that's highly likely. The only thing is, of course, we have no idea who the heck that is. Maybe this person is Rupert. That would be a good idea. We really don't have too much information on Rupert yet, other than the fact that, like, both his parents are dead. He's Luke's friend, and he doesn't like his stepmom, Caroline. He never has. And that's really not a strong enough motive to kill your friend, but perhaps there's something else there. So I'm going to keep that in mind. And of course, the other suspect now that we have is Posh Guy. Maybe Posh Guy and Luke had a fight, and then Posh Guy killed him. Again, I'm not like a super huge fan of that theory, but you know what? It's there, it's open, it's staying. That's where we are at. I will now be reading episode 3, and then I'll get back to you with what's happened. More notes, updated murder board again. I'm trying to get a little better at, like, my little lines. I feel like the new ones I've added are straighter, more cute. But again, I only have so much string. It might just get more chaotic. I feel like I also didn't plan this out well to have enough space to add more sticky notes. But we're working with it. We're working with what we got, and I will see you after episode 3. Okay, there hasn't been too much done to the murder board since I last left you. Really, all I did was just draw this line here for Posh Guy, the infamous Posh Guy. Oh my god, infamous, that's the name of the show in the book. Oh, Anyway, I finished reading episode 3. And while I was reading episode 3, I remembered that I forgot something that happened in episode 2. That something actually does relate to Posh Guy. And that is, we are also very much sure that Posh Guy is not Luke, because Luke was away at that time when Emily went home and heard her mother, Caroline, and Posh Guy. So it could not have been Luke. It was definitely an affair. That is definitely agreed as a fact. Here in episode 3, we got back with the information discovered through all of the investigating being done by our experts. Okay, remember how I said that they were all doing things? Bill and Mitchell were looking into Luke. Hugo and Alan were looking into Posh Guy, and Layla and JJ were looking into Rupert. Let's start with Rupert, shall we? We're standing up again. Things are getting deep. In episode 3, we have an interview with Malcolm. Malcolm is a friend of Rupert's from Cambridge, and that is where Rupert says he was the night of the murder. He says he was at Cambridge for a reunion dinner. He was there all evening. He did not leave. Malcolm confirms this. He says that Rupert was at that dinner and he did not leave for a long enough period of time to have gone back to London and killed Luke, which would have been about 2 hours one way, because Cambridge is about 60 miles away from London. Rupert did leave, though, during this dinner. According to Malcolm, Rupert left the dinner at 8:30 p.m. and when he came back half an hour later, he said that he had to make a call because there was a minor emergency at DP, which he said is Dorney Place. Now, the only thing is, he didn't get any other details. It does seem a bit odd. Rupert, as we know, doesn't like Caroline. They don't really have any kind of relationship. Why would he, at 23, now be concerned with anything going on at Dorney Place? How would he even know there was a minor emergency? Well, he might have got a text message. Sure, okay, he probably got a text message and made a call. But still, it seems odd. Maybe he was lying. And in the interview with Rupert, it does seem like that's the case, since he denies ever leaving the dinner. He denies making a call. He gets really defensive and then storms out of the interview. This doesn't necessarily mean that he made some call to put a hit on Luke. Maybe the time is just a coincidence, and that doesn't seem to make too much sense. The motive's not really strong there for Rupert to have killed Luke. And also, the manner in which Luke was murdered doesn't really suggest a hit. It suggests this was personal. I think Rupert is probably just being defensive about something else. We do know that he's also trying to run for office, so maybe whatever it was is something else that he doesn't want out, but is completely unrelated to the murder. We also have a bit more information about money and inheritance. Inheritance. This could be a possible motive for Rupert, no. Except for the fact that if you dig into it kind of at all, it doesn't really make that much sense. Basically, what we discover about the inheritance is that when Andrew died, he left everything to Caroline, including Dorney Place, the house. Once Caroline passes, that money is going to be split 4 ways between the 4 children, and then because Rupert is the oldest, he will receive Dorney Place. So you're thinking maybe that could be a motive, except for the fact that Luke has no effect on this inheritance. Whether he is married to Caroline, alive or dead, it does not change anything to do with either Dorney Place or the inheritance. So that seems unlikely. One other thing to note about financials and inheritance is that Caroline is spending money, and she is spending money fast. She is making her way through that money right now. She is spending it both on and with Luke. That's something to note, but still doesn't really affect anything Rupert-wise, because Rupert, if he killed Luke, that's not going to get him the money. If he was concerned about Caroline spending money so fast, he would kill Caroline. As of episode 3, Rupert's no longer a suspect for me. It's not likely he had anything to do with this murder. I think he just didn't like Caroline and he was at that dinner like he said. He does have a key to Dorney Place, so he could let himself in, but again, he wasn't even there that night, so that really has no effect. Now let's talk about Posh Guy. Posh Guy, the lines are dead. We tried to track them. They have really led us nowhere. We've narrowed it down to like 40 something people who owned this car at that time in that area in the right gender and age demographic, but we haven't had any leads with that yet. We've also interviewed multiple of Caroline's friends, and they all say that they had no idea she was having an affair, and they had no reasons to suspect she was having an affair. But as we know, Posh Guy is real and she was having an affair. I guess all of her friends weren't really that close to her. Then we have our research into Luke. And this is where things start getting interesting, okay? So let's talk about that. What we do know about Luke is that he was in Australia, right? He was born there, and we got some interviews with schoolmates from when he was a kid. They said he was really shy, he was really geeky, he got bullied a lot, that kind of thing. They all were really shocked to hear that he was in England to begin with and then was married to a rich older woman, and also that he was murdered. Did not seem in character. Not necessarily that being a victim of a brutal murder would be in character to anybody, but I feel like you get what I'm saying. We then move on to when he goes to Sydney. As we know, he was in Sydney, he became surfer boy. He was kind of his shy self to begin with, but then he got all muscly from the surfing, I guess, and then he started getting with the girls. We talked to his old boss at the bar that he used to work at. We discovered that he had a pretty serious potential girlfriend scenario, serious to the point where they were actually going to be moving in together. He was looking for a place to live with said girl, and then next thing you know, he's suddenly putting in his notice and he has left the country without the girl. According to his boss, he seemed really stressed when he was leaving so abruptly. So that is to note. Thanks to tax records from said boss, we learn that Luke left exactly on November 29th, 1995. Now, what we also discover from research by Mitchell is that something else happened around this time in Sydney. There was a hit and run that was located in direct line between where Luke worked and where Luke lived days before he left Australia suddenly. It was also considered to be drunk driving, hence the running part of the hit and run. It left a man in a coma. Now we're thinking, was Luke drunk driving and he was in a hit and run and then decided he needed to flee the country? Maybe. Create some interesting potential background here for our victim. Maybe not quite as innocent as we initially believed. So Luke then leaves. He's kind of like country hopping. I think he goes to Cambodia at some point. What we do know is that after a bit of time going away, he was in Beirut in 1997, where in August of that year, he was a victim in a terrorist attack of a bus bombing. We know this because Bill here, our good friend Detective Bill, he has found news footage from this attack in which they're inside a hospital and you can see Luke in the background of this footage. He has minor injuries, broken arm, cuts and scrapes and all that. There was like 30 people injured, 3 dead, and very soon after this, as one would expect, he left right away. And then as we know, he eventually ended up in Greece where he met Rupert. What we discover at the end of this episode is that Luke actually wasn't injured in the attack. He died. Which now means we have the very big question of, who was Luke Ryder? The one that Rupert knows, the one that married Caroline, and the one who died on October 3rd, 2003. Really, like, oh my god, right? Like the plot twist of that, the reveal. We do learn afterwards that nobody knew. Guy didn't know. Maura and Emily did not know. Caroline at the time, now present day, she suffers from Alzheimer's, dementia, so she isn't really involved in the present interviewing because she both does not have her memory and also therefore cannot be like a reliable source for any new information. This opens up a lot of new pathways ways. One is the fact that now this is a huge motive to kill him. I think Caroline really moves up. I mean, she was always number one suspect, but personally, she's now much more number one suspect because it's quite likely that maybe she found out Luke actually wasn't Luke. And that definitely would be something that would cause a crime of passion. The other thing is that maybe the King Cross collar knew who Luke actually was. This is something from the mystery Luke, fake Luke. What should we call him now? Maybe this is someone from fake Luke's past, and that came back to haunt him. Possibility. There's also, of course, still the fact that all of this stuff happened in Australia to Luke, and it's possible that somebody who didn't actually know Luke knew what he did and then thought fake Luke was real Luke because they didn't know that real Luke died. That's where we're at. This is like opening a lot of new things here. We're looking, and things are getting very interesting on the murder board. I made this big question mark just for the occasion, and I feel kind of happy about it. Now, suspect-wise, let's have a look. Of course, we still have Caroline, number one suspect. King's Cross collar is still very much a top suspect for the crime. And then Rupert has been completely cut off. He's not really a suspect anymore in my mind. Is it possible that now he also found out that Luke wasn't real Luke and Luke was actually fake Luke and then put a hit on him from Cambridge? Yes. But like I said, I just don't believe that because this is a crime of passion and it just doesn't sound like something that would have been a hitman. This was not done by a hitman in my opinion. So Rupert is not really a suspect for me anymore. And then Posh Guy, he's still a mystery, and as a result, he's still a suspect. We can't rule him out, but I don't think it's very likely, unless, again, Posh Guy was with Caroline and then somehow found out that Luke was fake Luke and not real Luke, and then had some big defensive thing about that. Who knows? Because, again, we have no idea who Posh Guy is. That's where things are. If you're wondering how fake Luke reconnected with his grandmother and she didn't realize, she never met Luke. So she doesn't know. Like, it's really that simple. Luke was born in Australia and never had contact with his grandparents until he came back to England. Fake Luke could easily pull off being real Luke to Grandma Florence. There we are. Updated murder board. I'm going to go read episode 4 now because duh, after that cliffhanger, you should be proud of me for not just continuing to read and actually updating you on this matter because the information we have received is dramatic. Things are getting really exciting, but I still have no idea what's going on. See you for the update of episode 4, because I really gotta go read that, like, right now. Okay, so where we left off, Luke is not actually real Luke, he is fake Luke. To begin with episode 4, let's just get this right out of the way. So, as we know, Luke died in Beirut. Who didn't die? Eric Fulston, who is actually 37 and not 26, and who is from Alabama in the United States of America and not actually Australian. So he was faking that, but we'll get back to more on exactly who Eric is in a moment. First, let's talk a little bit more about Caroline and Posh Guy. We end up talking with Shirley Booker, who used to be Caroline's flatmate when she first moved to London and started being a nanny. What we learn from Shirley is that Caroline most definitely was having an affair and she knew about it. So this is now 100% confirmed about Posh Guy. Shirley also describes that Caroline basically said she didn't go out looking to have an affair. It kind of just happened. And that also this person she was having an affair with was forbidden fruit. So what we can gather from this, I'm going to move Phyllis up more so she's not confused in all of this drama. Posh Guy was a fling and most likely was married. We also learned that apparently Caroline wanted to end things, and she had expressed that pretty close to when the murder happened, October 3rd, as we famously now know, and that she wasn't sure how Posh Guy would react to her wanting to end things. Question mark, question mark. Does that mean Posh Guy killed fake Luke? It's a possibility. Maybe Caroline tried to end things with Posh Guy. Posh Guy thought that if he killed fake Luke, that then Caroline would be all his. Crime of passion, a little suiting. We also discover some more information about the children. We haven't talked about the children much, probably because they were children. But what we learn here from Miss Shirley, is that all 3 kids hated Luke, especially Emily. She really did not like that guy, but they all were not fans of fake Luke. Fake Luke did not have a fan club in the Howard household. We also discover a few other things potentially about the kids. We find out that Maura potentially was in with a bad crowd, probably some older kids. There may have been drugs involved that was concerning Caroline, that she was getting involved in all of this and she was struggling to kind of rally her children. We also learned that after the murder, the children were acting out even more, that there was an incident at school that required the children to be in therapy in order to remain enrolled at the school. We also learned that Guy was a menace. On fake Luke and Caroline's wedding day, Guy fully just shoved a cake off a table. Props to him. We also have a bit more information regarding forensics. Hold on. I need to make room on the murder board. So we learn that the clothes Luke was wearing were actually never tested by forensics. This is because it was 2003. It was way more expensive and the DNA testing wasn't as good. Also, it was pouring rain. So the police probably thought it wasn't worth the money in their budget to try and get DNA testing off of something that likely didn't have any DNA on it. There were also 3 hairs found on fake Luke, but they didn't have roots, so they couldn't do testing at the time. But now testing is available for this, so we are now testing the clothes and testing the hair present day to see if that yields any new results. We know that the hair is brown and undyed. This means that it did not belong to Luke, fake Luke, and it did not belong to Caroline because she had bleached hair and fake Luke was a blonde. That's some interesting information. We also look a little bit further into Miss Florence. If you remember, way back in episode 1, right, we discussed how Florence had this inheritance that when she passed was going to go to fake Luke. That brought up the question. Fake Luke just appears suddenly, rekindles relationship with his grandma Florence. She changes the will so that everything goes to him. Who got cut out of the will because Luke was going to now get it? Potential wanting for the murders there, we believe, because money. So what we do, we talk to Sylvia. She's the care home worker who knew Florence very well. Florence actually left her jewelry in her will because she liked Sylvia so much, because obviously present day, 20 years later, Florence is now deceased. And what Sylvia tells us is that Florence's dead husband, Victor, okay, he has a cousin. That cousin is named Margaret Wilson. And what we also know, because wills are public domain, is that Margaret got the £4 million now that Luke died. What we should also note about Margaret has a son named Ian who was 28 at the time of the murder. What we also discover from Sylvia is that both Margaret and Ian seem pretty greedy folks, considering they popped up at the care home after Florence actually died, trying to demand that they should get everything, including the jewelry that was given to Sylvia. We also know that fake Luke, he visited Florence twice a month. Usually. He reached out, he provided his passport to show that he wasn't just some fake guy pretending to be a long-lost relative. So Luke, he would hang out with Florence all the time. Never brought Caroline, his wife, always went by himself, always hung out with Florence. Sylvia says he was a huge hit with the old ladies. Everybody loved him. Before we get to Eric, let's talk about one further thing. We did some more investigating into Australia and the hit and run. From this, we discover that the likely victim in the hit and run was Mohammed Khan, who was a student at the time, age 19. This is not confirmed because the police won't actually confirm it, but our good friend Mitchell, the journalist over here, he spoke to the police and they kind of pointed him in the direction that to look at students, and everything about Mohammed that they found lines up with the dates and events of the hit and run. And of course, real Luke, this is all in regards to real Luke. Real Luke then left and was killed in Beirut, where Eric stole his passport. Now, of course, Eric doesn't actually look like Luke because he's fake Luke. What he most likely did was he took the partially destroyed passport from the attack that belonged to Luke, sent it to the Australian embassy, government, whoever, and provided a photo of himself to get a new one because he had the passport and he said he was him and he was in this accident and this other guy named Eric was dead. He just got himself a passport in Luke's name. We then need to follow up on Eric Fulston. Who was Eric? As we know, he was actually 11 years older than Luke. How did he pull that off? Because 37 is quite the different age from 26. We do confirm that the children and Rupert, he's also part of the children, but I feel like they're kind of separate because they're half siblings. Rupert, Guy, Emily, Maura, none of them knew. None of them knew Luke was fake Luke. They did not know he was Eric. They did not know he was 11 years older, and they were shocked he was able to get away with that. Our friend here, Bill, the detective, he goes to Alabama to investigate Eric. And what we discover from talking with his old Little League coach as well as his 11th grade teacher is that Eric actually was a very shy, small child who was very nice, did well in school, okay? He had a very strict father. And what his teacher tells us is that while never explicitly said, Eric basically confided in her that he was gay. And in a very small town of Alabama, this was a difficult life for him to live. So he drops out of school at the age of 17 and moves to New York in 1982. Now, if you're following some of the things I just said, they might not be lining up. One, mainly, would be Eric is gay. Why would he be married to Caroline? And we also know from Shirley that Caroline said that fake Luke was the best she's ever had. So that doesn't quite line up. Also, Luke was tall. Eric was known to be short. Also, Eric is from this really small town in Alabama. Basically, nobody has a passport. Everybody that Bill talked to was shocked that he would even have a passport, let alone be in Beirut in 1997, killed in a terrorist attack. We also learned from his Little League coach that he was never really good at baseball, but of course we know Luke was quite athletic given the fact that he was surfer boy. And what this leads us to deduce, oh, I got green marker all over my fingers now. Wonderful. Fake Luke is also fake Eric. The wheels keep turning. The questions keep coming. What is going on? What we assume is that Eric did move to New York in 1982, and he probably died. At the time that Eric was in New York, he could be the victim of a hate crime. He could be the victim of just a random shooting. There was also a drugs epidemic at the time in New York that he could be a victim of. There's many likelihoods that Eric actually is dead. And because this was in the 90s, nobody really would know. He left his hometown. There's no social media internet wise. He probably died, and fake Luke was actually also fake Eric. He probably just took Eric's identity and did the same thing, got himself a passport under Eric's name because Eric probably never had one and he was dead, and then went on the road. Given the fact that fake Luke is now also fake Eric, we've come to the assumption that this is probably a serial imposter. It's a con man. But we still need to figure out who he is. And this opens up quite a few more options. So now, King's Cross caller, still a suspect because maybe it was someone who's been tracing Eric for a con he did. That would certainly lead to a crime of passion. We also have Ian over here, clearly wanting the money. Luke shows up, meaning that he no longer would get any. That's definitely a motive for him to kill fake Luke because he doesn't know that fake Luke is fake. We also now are starting to question the children, okay? They were clearly not a fan of Luke, having some tough times in their lives, and we only know that they found the body and called 999 and got home at 10:30 because they said so. Is there something else there? Is this crime something that 15-year-old Maura and or 13-year-old Emily are capable of, or even 10-year-old Guy? I really doubt Guy had anything to do with it, considering he's like starting this show to dig up 20 years of crime, try and solve it. I feel like if he was involved in any way or knew that he would not be doing this to begin with. After episode 4 airs, we learn a couple more things from those additional parts of the multimedia book. We see between Maura and Emily the incident at school that led to them needing therapy was a fire. And based off of the way the text conversation goes, we are led to believe that Emily was the one involved in a school fire. We also learned from Shirley that Maura and Emily were like really close. So it's also likely that they might know something and Guy is completely unaware of it. It makes sense that they would potentially have secrets that he does not know about, and I'm definitely keeping that in mind. As we found out, Guy was actually a pretty difficult kid. And from the text between Maura and Emily, they suggest that perhaps he has some of his own dirty laundry, and how would he like it if they started airing that on him? What's there to know about Guy? Finally, in terms of the hit and run accident in Australia, you may remember that Lila had that contact in Australia where she did not want Mitchell to go digging around where he didn't belong. But Mitchell sends an email to Layla and he asks her, "Hey Layla, this totally might be a coincidence, but wasn't your maiden name Khan?" Yeah. And Layla replies and she just says, "Oh, such a common last name. That's why, total coincidence." But then we see that she leaves a voicemail for her mother and she needs to talk to her about something. So I think it's quite likely that Layla is somehow related to Mohammed here and the hit and run accident. And what connections does that lead her to with real Luke? And if she did not know real Luke was actually fake Luke, what that means for her relationship with fake Luke as well. Who's fake Eric, who is Mystery Man. I'm just going to refer to him as fake Luke since we've been calling him Luke this whole time. This is where we're at. In terms of suspects, just to go over it again, Ian as a suspect, he's pretty greedy. Maybe he killed for money because Luke came back and was going to take $4 million from him. We still have the King Cross. Maybe this is someone from fake Luke's past. Maybe they called and maybe they killed. We also, of course, still have Caroline, though this is getting weaker by the minute. It seems so obvious. Too many things are pointing to Caroline to believe that Caroline is the actual culprit here. Shirley says that she has a son who was getting into surfing, and this son told her that it's really clear that Luke actually doesn't know anything about surfing. So Shirley brought it up to Caroline, being like, "Do you think Luke is like not who he says he is?" Because like also like his Australian accent is kind of whack. And Caroline basically said that she doesn't care who he is. So it seems like if she found out that Luke was an imposter, that she probably wouldn't care enough to kill him. Of course, we still have Posh Guy in the mix here. He's still a possibility. This question mark about how he would react to Caroline trying to end things very close to the date of the murder is definitely raising a few flags. I'm not quite sure yet on the color of the flags. That's why I've not designated it yet. And as we already know from the last episode, Rupert's gone. Though there are some question marks now raising around Maura and Emily. I don't know if necessarily they were the murderers, but I think that perhaps there is something more going on here. I'm now about to head into episode 5. And I feel like at this point, we should really have all of the information. And I'm leaning more towards something we found out sooner rather than later. I'm not really leaning on the Ian Wilson suspect. This feels like it's brought up too late in the game. I don't think it's strong enough to hold. I'm still leaning on King's Cross Collar, Posh Guy as top suspects here, but of course there's still quite a lot of book to go. I will also say there's definitely some more things happening with our experts here. Hugo sends this email to a relative, potentially his sister, that mentions the other thing. I don't know what the other thing is. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something. It was included, so we have to consider it. Lila, of course, has this whole maiden name Khan thing. Mitchell was at the scene of the crime. Okay. Alan seems very, very questioning of Bill. Why would Bill suspect that Luke was fake Luke to begin with? Bill says that he found it out because in an image of real Luke from behind that they got from his boss in Australia at the bar, that you could see that Luke had a tattoo on his back shoulder. And of course, on the autopsy for fake Luke, it is known that he doesn't have any tattoos. Now, this clearly does say like, okay, yeah, it makes it obvious that he has a fake identity, but why would you think that in the first place? A little questionable. We also see Alan reaching out to another contact he has at the Met Police in London, asking them for a contact in the NYPD. Of course, this may just be that he's wanting to try and figure out who fake Luke is because they can trace him back to New York, but it's also possible that maybe he's not trusting everything that Bill is coming here with. It's definitely getting deep. Stay tuned. Episode 5 coming your way. Hello, we're back. I've added quite a few lines to the murder board, mainly just because I felt like adding more lines. I've connected all 3 of these children to the idea of hating Luke because that felt fun. I also have here Layla to Mohammed Khan, the victim of the hit and run, because of this last name here, and also because of Layla's shadiness. We are also back to every light I own shining on me. It is 7 p.m. and I'm going to be honest with you guys, there is absolutely no way I'm solving this today. But here we are. Let's talk episode 5. There hasn't been too many things to add to the murder board. However, there are some interesting things to note. Let's start with Ian. Shall we? Our good friend Detective Bill here talked to Peter, who was like, look, I can't really tell you about the alibis for the Wilsons. However, I could potentially tell you to go visit this woman at a B&B outside of London. So Bill goes, and there he interviews Christine. This is not her real name because, of course, she doesn't want her identity revealed on camera, and people are suspecting that she might be lying for Ian about the alibi she's giving. At the time of the murder, she was in her 40s. She was working at the bar. Ian came to the bar. They spent the night together. She says she remembers the exact date because it was her birthday. This seems pretty solid. Again, I was never really going down the Ian route just because it felt like he was introduced as a possible suspect way too late in the book. I think we still need to figure out who this King's Cross collar person was. I'm mildly obsessed with that. We also find out from Alan, our other good friend, Detective Alan, he's actually had a lead with this red sports car. Posh Guy's red sports car. Dang it, I need to move Phyllis again. I'm sorry, Phyllis. It looks like with the lead that Alan has that the red sports car actually belongs to Posh Guy's sister. Now, for whatever reason, Alan doesn't want to give the name of the sister. Who's the sister? Who is Posh Guy? Questions, suspicions. I honestly, I had a look at this board and I was like, I don't see anybody here who has a sister and that Caroline would be having an affair with. I honestly don't know. And I feel like it must be somebody that has been introduced. Maybe I didn't even think them to be significant enough to put on the board. Maybe it's one of the experts. I mean, these people are starting to get shady. Okay, they're starting to get suspicious. In episode 5, there's a lot of tension here between Mitchell and Hugo. What's that about? Where'd that come from? Nobody knows. And as we know, there's already tension between Bill and Alan, and then Layla and the Australia thing. I'm getting tied up in my microphone. And then JJ honestly just seems like the only normal guy. He seems like the only one who's here to freaking investigate stuff. We haven't got anything back on the clothes or the hair yet, so that's still up in the air. But we did do some further research into Eric, the real Eric. So let's add him to the board because this is fake Eric, remember? So we need to add real Eric. We now very much believe that Eric is dead, that he died in 1994 in New York. Bill, our good friend Detective Bill, reached out to a contact in the NYPD who did some searching of a picture of the real Eric against John Doe's from the 90s. And there is one that was found that looks like it is Eric, who was the victim of a fatal mugging. There was no IDs or wallet on this person. Now, whether that means fake Luke killed him might not be. It's possible but that Eric could have been the victim of a hate crime. Where his body was found was near a known gay bar, so it's possible that he was a victim of a hate crime and then fake Luke, fake Eric over here just decided to take advantage of the situation the same way he did in Beirut. When it comes to the name Eric Fulston, it's possible that he comes up somewhere else in New York in 1994. And that is with Rose Schulman. So he was pictured going to a gala with her. She was 56 at that time. She is a rich woman and she ended up having $800,000 and also a bunch of fine jewelry stolen from her by fake Eric, who later became fake Luke. The team as in the team on the show, the crew for the show, not the experts, the show crew, they went to Greece and they found evidence that there was an English woman in Greece, also pictured to be in her 40s and with Luke, who was of course fake Luke at that point. So now you're looking here at his con man trajectory, what he did in between New York in 1994 and Greece in 1998, sometime before 1999, because it was before Rupert's dad died. This is where that. But the trail kind of dies there. There's no leads after that. We don't know exactly who this woman is. There's no real way to find out who she is. Nobody really remembers her name. Rupert claims he doesn't even remember her existing. Well, he says he remembers her face, but like doesn't remember Luke being with her at all. Rupert seems to clearly never remember anything of importance around here. The team also at the end of the episode reveals one final big drop, and what we find out is that they have gone through and noticed something on footage from Caroline and Andrew's honeymoon film. Now, this was like provided to the show by Guy simply to use as B-roll. However, on this, they notice something about Caroline, who notoriously apparently has never worn a bikini. She always wears one pieces. Why is that? It's because she has a scar for a C-section. There's a secret baby. Caroline had a baby some point before she was married to Andrew. Now, way back in like episode 2, I think, it was mentioned that Caroline was at a private school for like high school, but then she left at age 16. She had gotten involved with an older man, not named, and was sent away to live with her uncle. We, of course, now at this point have to believe that she was sent away at 16 to live with her uncle after being with an older man because maybe perhaps she was having the secret baby. We have no idea of the identity of the secret baby. Episode 5 felt like not a ton happened, but what did happen felt important. Though I also feel like perhaps the baby is not going to have too much to do with it. I think anything at this point that is so huge of like a ball drop, it's too late in the book for it to be to any significance of who killed Luke, right? I'm still waiting to see about Posh Guy. I'm feeling that this is like a good way to go, suspect-wise, as well as, of course, King's Cross Collar. I've been team who is that. I think they did it since like the beginning, and I'm holding on to that still so far. I still haven't seen any evidence to say no. There hasn't been much evidence to say yes and who that is, but it also definitely has not been ruled out yet. Really, we still have these questions about the children. Both Maura and Guy were very upset at being asked to even talk or anything about the fact that they went to therapy. So that's an iffy subject. But also I feel like, duh, why would anybody want to talk on camera about their therapy they had as a child? That makes sense to me. So I don't really hold that against either of them. Whatever is going on here with the sibling mother family dynamic is definitely very interesting. And I don't know how much of a role it's going to play in solving the murder. I'm really enjoying how my murder board is coming together. I think it's pretty cute. It's pretty fun. I'm going to draw a few more lines here for the couple of sticky notes I've added. And yeah, see you for the update on episode 6. So here we are. It is 9 p.m. again. It is officially 24 hours since I gave you the beginning of the murder board. And I have finished reading episode 6. Oh boy. Oh boy, indeed. So let's talk about it. We're standing for obvious reasons. Things are highly dramatic at the moment. Obviously, secret baby is now on the board. What we do know is that narrowing down the dates where Caroline kind of is like off the radar and is sent to Birmingham to be with her uncle at 16 after she was in a relationship with an older man. It is assumed that the baby was born during that period of time. That means the baby was 24 at the time of the murder and is 44 now. During this period of conversation between the experts, JJ is giving me suspicious vibes. Those vibes are having me thinking that he was adopted. They're talking about how the baby might feel, how they could have grown up like very impoverished if they were put up for adoption, how they might feel like abandoned and all this. He starts sounding very defensive, and then he also makes this comment about how like, oh, many people who are adopted even though they can find their like birth parent information or whatever at 18, choose not to. And that makes me think this may be wild. Like, I may just be losing my mind because I've been doing this for 24 hours, but I'm fully convinced that JJ is the secret baby. I'm convinced it is. Okay, that's my brain. My brain is getting to that conclusion. JJ, secret baby of Caroline. It just makes sense in my head. I'm going with it. It's out in the open. I've stated it now. Okay. We also find out that Alan, our good friend Detective Alan, has actually been looking into our good friend Detective Bill. And what he discovers by rewatching some tapes of when Bill went to Alabama and spoke to witnesses there, that in the interviews, especially Nancy, the teacher that he spoke to, she was speaking as if she had already spoke to Bill about all of this before. And upon further investigation with that NYPD contact he reached out to that I mentioned, like, who knows how many episodes ago, that Bill was actually the detective in charge of the Eric Fulston case in NYPD, as in the fake Eric Fulston that conned Rose Schulman. And not only that, but he has been obsessed with this case for 25 years. And even now, as a retired private eye, he is still being paid by the Schulman family to track down the missing money and who Eric Fulston really was. Just let that sink in. So naturally, like, everybody's mad. All the people over here are mad. Okay, Bill admits that he found out about this show happening and he reached out and requested to be on the show. So that's why he's the only American on the show. We find out that he's been following this case, like I said, for 25 years. So he already knew fake Luke was fake Luke because he was actually fake Eric. Okay, Bill has already gone to Alabama. He's already gone to Beirut. He's already gone to Australia, I think. He's been all over. He's been chasing this case because, again, he is obsessed. He's a man obsessed. I was so excited. I forgot I have a sticky note for this. Bill was the lead investigator for the Eric Fulston case. One might say that given his obsession for wanting to hunt down fake Eric, fake Luke, that Bill is now a suspect. And you would be 100% correct, because there was a conference October 1st to October 4th in 2003. Okay. When was the murder? October 3rd, 2003, right? You're with me. And this conference was taking place in London, and Bill was on the directory as going to be at this conference. He denies being there, but we have yet to see proof. JJ, Mr. Potential Secret Baby JJ, okay, he's been going on a mission as well. On Luke's person, fake Luke's person, in his wallet, there was a picture. In that picture, little tiny Luke with his mom, and there is a water tank in the background. It's like a small town. There's a water tank, blah, 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 blah. Except JJ thinks this is not a photo of Luke. This is not a photo of Eric. This is a photo of whoever the heck fake Luke, fake Eric actually is, because he's carrying it around in his wallet, which makes it very personal. So JJ goes on a crazy mission and he finds out that this water tower in the photo in the wallet of fake Luke is from Canada. It is from a tiny town in New Brunswick, Canada, to be exact. Fun fact, I'm in Canada. I'm Canadian. I have nothing to do with this case. Through all of this, okay, they talk to a pastor, like a minister that was there at the time that this family was there. They track it all down and they find out the true identity of fake Luke. Fake Luke is actually Jonah McKenna. I'll add his family tree over here. We're solving murders. So Jonah's parents were Lawrence and Marie. He also had an older sister named Rebecca. And what we discover from this minister is that Jonah died when he was 17. And you're probably thinking, huh? And let me tell you, it's a lot. So Jonah, they say, died when he was 17 because that summer he got a job out in Halifax at the marina. He ended up getting involved with an older woman and then had an altercation with that older woman's husband where the husband ended up in hospital. Jonah then disappeared. All of his belongings were left behind, including his passport and ID. And then days later, his clothes washed up on shore. He was presumed to be dead, having drowned. But what do we know? That didn't happen because fake Luke has a picture of Jonah when he was a kid. And how would that happen unless Jonah faked his death and became who knows before becoming Eric, before becoming Luke? Right? Fascinating. We are trying to find Rebecca because Rebecca, of course, is the only living relative right now of Jonah. If we get DNA from Rebecca, we can compare it to the DNA of fake Luke and confirm if fake Luke is Jonah. But I am feeling pretty confident about this fact. One final thing. After our good friend Detective Allen looked into our good friend Detective Bill, our good friend Detective Bill looked into our good friend Detective Allen. Yes. So Bill, he went back to Greece, and when he was in Greece, he questioned people a bit more. He found another bartender that worked at the same bar Luke had that summer, and that bartender mentioned about how a British man came to the bar the next year and was looking for Luke. And because Bill was like, wow, is somebody's going to go all the way to Greece to try and find Luke? They're pretty they're pretty dedicated to the cause. So he did some further investigating and found a personal ad in a paper that also was looking for Luke. And because our good friend Detective Bill is a detective, he noted that the language used in this personal ad was very much like cop lingo. You know, it was written in the tone that police tend to use. So that led him to believe that it was quite likely that somebody who had police experience was the one looking for Luke. And I guess just because he was feeling petty. I don't know why he decided to look into Alan specifically, but he did. And when he did, he found out that Alan has a sister. And that sister divorced her husband in 1997 and then went bankrupt in 1999. When was Luke in Greece? 1998. And when they first looked at Greece, there was an English woman who was age 40, the same age as Alan's sister, who it's believed Luke was trying to con. When they first asked around, they couldn't get a exact name. There was a couple floating around. One person said Irene, another person said Carrie. We now have reason to believe that this English woman was Eileen Canning, Alan's sister. So now Alan is also linked to fake Luke because he was wanting to find Luke because he conned his sister in Greece. So now both Bill and Alan are suspects in the murder of fake Luke because they both have motives for wanting to find him and they both have grudges. JJ could be a black sheep, okay? You know, because I'm fully convinced that he's the secret baby. He's from Birmingham. Mitchell, I think, is innocent. His connection's already been shown. He's an expert because he was at the scene of the crime. Layla, I believe, was chosen as an expert because she's connected to Mohammed Khan. So I think both Mitchell and Layla are not suspects. Both Bill and Alan are. JJ potentially is now, though I don't see really any motive for why he would kill Luke. It's likely he's just trying to find Caroline, his birth mother, and not actually be a suspect for the murder of fake Luke. So the only one that there's a question mark on, why is he here, is Hugo, the lawyer. And we'll note, of course, that there is that email that he sent a couple episodes back where he mentioned the other thing or other things. I don't know. I can't remember if it was plural or not. But also, I don't think at this point, okay, we're at the end of episode 6. Also at the end of episode 6, we discover that there's actually going to be a bonus episode. There's going to be episode 7 and there's going to be bonus episode 8. We'll see. I'm not sure if I'm going to do an update for both or not because I don't know exactly how the bonus episode is working. As of right now, I believe that JJ is the secret baby and that as the secret baby, he was actually the King Cross caller, okay? And that he showed up at King's Cross Station and called Dorney Place because he would have the address of Caroline by having looked into her as his birth mother, and that Luke answered the call, okay, for whatever reason decided to meet JJ. I don't know if that's true, but like that's what I feel like. It's quite possible that JJ is the secret baby and the secret baby is the King's Cross collar. Sounds logical to me. Can people stop screaming outside? It's almost like it's St. Patrick's Day weekend and like I'm inside solving murder while everybody else is having fun. Weird. Obviously, then both Bill and Alan could have just showed up looking for Luke that night and murdered him. Caroline's off the table. Rupert's off the table. Ian is off the table as suspects. I don't think any of the children are suspects either. I truly think that it's most likely that the killer is either mysterious posh guy or one of our experts. I'm honestly at this point, I want to say it's JJ because that feels like it's going to be the most out of the blue. I feel like Bill and Alan, both now it's been revealed this kind of like revenge plot that they have, that it would be too obvious for it to be one of them. So I'm really sticking to the fact that it was JJ as the secret baby who was the King's Cross collar, who called and Luke answered, and he, for whatever reason, told him something that caused Luke to not go to the party, and instead he met JJ and there was some kind of fight, and then JJ killed Luke, and now JJ is a crime scene investigator, but that could be completely wrong. So I'll see you at the next update. Hello, so it's officially day 2 of solving this murder, and I'm very, very close. I actually haven't read any more of the book. That is mostly because I wanted to finish up my string attaching for the murder board. I also was editing this video because obviously you see the timestamps of where we are right now. I am not editing this in all one go. I've been editing as I go, thank goodness. The tiny bit of my sanity that is left is thanking me for that. But while I was editing, I came across some key information. It's like I already knew it, but I forgot because last night I lost my mind, you know? So upon reviewing what I had gone through yesterday, I came to a conclusion about something. I know who Posh Guy is. Okay, so let's talk about it before we get into episode 7, because I don't know if the reveal is going to be in episode 7 or in episode 8. Okay, calm down. I have no idea if you can hear that. I really hope you cannot hear that car right now. I'm trying to solve a murder. So when I was editing episode 4, I remembered that Hugo had sent an email that had said, thanks about the other thing. And that seems suspicious. And he does seem suspicious. What we also know is that Alan was looking at the vintage red sports car and found out that it actually belonged to somebody's sister, but he would not say that person's name. I looked back at that email that Hugo sent, and it was sent to his sister. So now I fully believe that the sister who owns the car is Serena Hamilton, who is the sister that Hugo emailed about their father's birthday and mentioned thanks for not mentioning the other thing or whatever it was that he said. So I now believe that Hugo is Posh Guy. And now I have my explanations for why all 6 of the experts are on the show. Guys, I'm so proud of myself for deducing this. Like, honestly, like, I both figured out that JJ is the secret baby and that Hugo is Posh Guy before they were revealed. Could I be wrong? Yes, but you cannot tell me this doesn't make sense. There's nobody else on this board that has a sister, and we know Hugo is posh because he's big shot lawyer man. So it makes sense. Hugo is Posh Guy. JJ is secret baby. So now I'm thinking, I still want to believe that JJ as the secret baby is King's Cross collar. However, like I said before in my previous thing, I didn't really see much of a motive for secret baby to want to kill Luke, especially since secret baby doesn't know that Luke was fake Luke. We don't have any proof to prove that. Great explanation there. So I'm now thinking Hugo is Posh Guy, and that Posh Guy is the killer. So that Hugo is the killer of Luke, because as we know, Caroline was wanting to end the fling with Posh Guy and she wasn't sure how he'd react. And Hugo is a lawyer, so wouldn't he know how to get away with a crime? God, I feel like a genius right now. Honest to goodness, I feel so smart and I'm feeling like pretty confident. Honestly, I'm feeling overconfident. I am going with Hugo as the killer of Luke, and he didn't even know he was fake Luke. That's what I'm going with. So now I'll get back to you with the actual update. I have finished the book. So let's talk about reveals and find out if I solved murder in the family. First, we do discover that indeed all 6 of our experts were chosen on purpose. Both Bill and Alan actually reached out to the producers of the show wanting to be on the show because of the connections that we know. Obviously, Bill was the detective for the Eric Folston case. He's been looking for Eric Folston now for 25 years. Alan has been looking for Luke because he conned his sister, Eileen, back in Greece in 1998. We find out that Layla, indeed, her brother was Mohammed Khan. However, she says that it wasn't Luke who did the hit and run that killed her brother because there was a deathbed confession by somebody else in 2006 that contacted her family to admit to their crime. So I was correct, but also I wasn't because nobody was correct. You know, when it comes to JJ, like I'm mostly correct. Everybody does think that he is the secret baby. The time lines up. He is from Birmingham, which is where Caroline was when she had the secret baby. However, he's not going to be running any kind of DNA tests. He says he's not the baby, so inconclusive, but the assumptions were correct to think that. Hugo, okay, was Posh Guy. I was correct. I guessed it right. Okay, the car was his sister, Serena, and he was Posh Guy. He was having the affair with Caroline. Nailed it. And then finally, we actually find out something else about Mitchell, and that is that Mitchell was involved with Maura. They were dating at the time. Mitchell was the older bad crowd that Maura was getting involved with, that Caroline was concerned about. And this further explains why he was at the scene of the crime, and that the truth really lies somewhere between what he initially said and what the police said. Let's talk about that a little bit, shall we? Because our timeline is about to change. What we learn from Mitchell is that Caroline did drop off Maura and Emily at the cinema at 8:15, but shortly after 8:15, Mitchell picked Maura up from the cinema. Emily was going to the cinema to give Maura an alibi to sneak out and be with Mitchell. They went back to Mitchell's apartment to spend the evening, and then I'm too short for this. I don't even know if you can see that. Maybe I should put this somewhere else. Then at 10 p.m., Mitchell drops Maura off at the corner of the road that Dorney Place is on. This means that long ago witness that placed him possibly at the scene 40 minutes earlier was correct. Mitchell then says that he dropped Maura off, he left, but he received a call at 10:35 p.m. from Maura, and it seems like it was an accidental call, like a butt dial. It sounded a lot of moans and groan things happening on the other end of the line, but Maura could not hear him. Because of this call, Mitchell decides he should go back to Dorney Place, and that is when he sneaks in after the police, sees the body, runs away, and is arrested. So I was actually super correct, like way back in episode 2 when I said that the truth lay somewhere in between. However, I did not see this coming. Did not see that. Oh, buddy, did I not see that? So then this is another thing where I was like, oh my God, literally, like if you've watched this video until now, you'll remember way back when I was like, what if Maura and Emily are lying about getting home at 10:30 because we don't have any proof of that. We just have them saying that's what happened. Maura says, yeah, because now this timeline has changed. She eventually says, after quite a bit of probing, she has a couple different stories first, but she comes out and she says, Mitchell dropped me off at 10 p.m. Emily was supposed to meet her there. She waited a few minutes. Emily did not arrive, so Maura just assumed that Emily probably went home from the movie earlier. Since Emily didn't even want to go to the movie, she just went to be basically the alibi for Maura to sneak out and be with Mitchell. So Maura goes home. home. When Maura gets home, she finds Emily cleaning blood off of something in the laundry room and then putting something in the washer and turning it on. Maura says Emily didn't know she was there. She simply didn't think anything of it at first because Emily was 13. She had just started her period. Maura assumed that she probably had some kind of leak from her period that she was probably embarrassed about, so she didn't want to bring it up. She then decides to head out to her room where, as we've said before, she comes across the body. So she comes in, she finds Emily, and she tells Emily that Luke is dead. She says Emily doesn't look shocked, and so then she assumes Emily already knew this. And when Maura says that they should lie and say they got home from the movies together at 10:30 and then found the body, Emily doesn't say anything about it, just says she's going to go upstairs and check on Guy. Maura then assumes that Emily killed Luke. Emily is the murderer. Or is she? That's right, we get even further investigation into this, and perhaps the more information we get, the trickier things become. Maybe Emily didn't kill Luke. Let's talk about that. After Emily is arrested, we get a voice recording of Maura going to see her in prison, where Maura says and explains her part of the story that she, this whole time, has been protecting Emily because she thought that she murdered Luke. Emily is absolutely shocked by this because she didn't think Maura thought Emily murdered Luke, and so now we're doubting. Did Emily murder Luke? Her hair was in his jacket. Can whoever is upstairs stop hammering right now? Like, this is a dramatic moment. But Emily says that her hair was in his jacket simply because she tried his jacket on one day and her hair got stuck in it, which is possible. You'll also note that, of course, Luke was very brutally beaten. There's no signs of any injuries on Emily, and surely there would be something if she murdered him. She was only 13. If she murdered him, surely there must have been some kind of fight beforehand. It's weird that she would come out completely unscathed. We also get new interview from Ian Wilson. He had initially ran away from the country very soon after the murder on October 3rd. We never got his true side of the story. Of course, we had his alibi, Christine, which seemed solid at the time. But after Emily was arrested for murdering Luke, Ian contacted the show because he wanted to do an interview. In this interview, Ian admits that he was the King Cross caller. I know, guys, I'm disappointed. I thought that the King's Cross collar would have been the baby. It would have been the secret baby, JJ, but it wasn't. The King's Cross collar was Ian. Ian had called Luke that afternoon at King's Cross Station because he wanted to talk about the inheritance from Florence. He didn't think it was fair that Luke turned out of the blue nowhere and now got everything, despite the fact that Ian said that his father, who was the brother of Victor, was very close to each other, and that he thought his uncle Victor would have actually wanted for his mother and Ian to receive some of the inheritance. So Ian says that Luke agreed to meet him, but would only meet him outside. So they walked around the side of the house into the back garden. There became some shoving, some pushing. He says that Luke lost his balance while pushing Ian and fell down the stairs and hit his head. Okay, Ian then says that he saw a light turn on in the house, so he ran away. But when he ran away, he tripped over something, got back up, and ran. But when he turned around, he saw the person who murdered Luke. Who was it? Oh my God. Who killed him? Was it Emily? Was it? No. Ian says that what he tripped over, which became the murder weapon, was not a piece of the paving stones from the under construction stairs. He tripped over a child's cricket bat. And who did Ian see standing over Luke with the cricket bat that night? 10-year-old Guy. Guy killed Luke. Guy killed Luke. Guy. Literally Guy. Which means that Emily actually got home from the movies early, like she said, but found that Guy had killed Luke. So Emily cleaned Guy up, put him back to bed, and then came back downstairs to find Maura, who said, Luke's dead. we should lie about it. So while Maura thought she was protecting Emily, Emily this whole time has been protecting Guy. And Guy, you might be wondering, Guy's the director of this show. Why the hell would he start this show if he killed the guy that they're trying to solve the murder for? Guy has no recollection of this. Way early on in the book, when we talked about the fact that Andrew died of a heart attack, we learned that Guy was the only one there to witness it. This obviously was quite the traumatic experience for a 6-year-old child to go through. And as we know, the children never went into therapy until there was that issue at school after the murder of Luke. It is assumed that Guy at age 10 woke up after hearing the commotion of Ian and Luke fighting in the backyard, came down to find Luke unconscious at the bottom of the stairs, probably had some kind of effect or trigger on Guy to when he was there when his father collapsed and died, and in some form of fugue state, Guy picked up his own child's cricket bat and murdered Luke. It's wild, I know, it's insane. Guys, after reading this, I'm like, how did I think it was Hugo? Like, how did I think Posh Guy did this? Wild. Guy's the killer of Luke, who of course was fake Luke, who was fake Eric, who was actually Jonah McKenna. And that is where our story ends. Or does it? Because after the show airs, we see that Bill here, our good friend Detective Bill, contacts the Schulman family. He lets them know that now that Guy has been arrested for this murder, and he was so young, and given the state of his psyche at the time and how old the case is, that it's probably not going to be investigated further to confirm that Jonah was actually Jonah, and that now Detective Bill is going to do his best to track down his sister Rebecca. We know that Rebecca, when she was younger, she was a redhead. She became a nurse for overseas aid nurse, and now Bill is doing his best to track her down and get DNA so he can prove that Jonah was Jonah and look further into bank details to get back the money for the Schulmans. We then see a newspaper article where Guy has been found dead. There's a witness that has seen a red-headed nurse leaving the home shortly before, but this is written off. The Howard family said that they didn't have anybody with that description working for them. Guy was at this time, of course, staying with his mother Caroline, who has Alzheimer's, and would have multiple nurses and caretakers to help aid her living. And Guy's found dead. It is supposed to be a heart attack, but as we know from a very brief sentence very early on in the book, that there is a injectable drug that metabolizes very quickly in a body that can make it look like a heart attack. And there was a witness who saw a red-headed nurse leaving the Howard house. Rebecca? The last thing we finally see is a newspaper article from the small town of New Brunswick saying that an expensive watch with the initial G was found at the known memorial spot for Jonah. And if anybody owns this watch, they should come claim it. Guys, when I tell you that this mystery has thrown me for a loop 7 times over, like, oh my gosh, it's crazy, it's wild, it's fantabulous. This book is like a 12 out of 5 stars. This was so good. And obviously I had probably more fun because I was doing all of this while reading it, but this was still put together so well. And I'm definitely going to try and read it again in the future because I would love to see exactly where all of these clues were laid out. Although I didn't solve the murder, I do think that I came to quite a few correct conclusions, and I'm kind of proud of that. And I don't think like anybody could have seen this coming. Like, this was wild. I truly don't know what to do now. Like, do I just end this video? This has been the last over 24 hours of my life straight. If you like the video, make sure to give it a like And if you happen to like me, consider subscribing. I'd be happy to have you. I do have some other ideas for more in-depth book content similar to this, not necessarily solving more murders or whodunits, but kind of doing something that is more in-depth, more long form, and with visuals. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, do let me know down below, because that could be fun. I had a lot of fun making this. Let me know if you had come to any different conclusions than me. Did you solve it? Did you think something else other than me? Did you catch anything that I missed? Let me know all of that. So that is it for now. I will see you in the next one, and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Bye-bye.